Well, Karthik, thank you so much for helping me with my project. I was wondering if you could introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Karthik Nanarajan. I'm a former Deloitte Consulting manager. Been in enterprise performance management and corporate performance management for the last basically my entire career, 20 plus years. And this year recently left Deloitte, went independent, and working on trying to find my own clients. COVID's been a bit of a challenge, obviously to everyone, but still, it's things are going well overall, and you know, uh, and of course, for anyone who wants to see this video, Nathan and I have known each other for 4.5 years now. When I first started at Anaplan, my employer before Deloitte, Nathan was a wonderful person who I looked up to, who mentored me, and who helped me get on board. And he's the reason. If at all anyone considers me an Anaplan expert, Mr. Nathan Price is the reason for that. And to this day, I consider him a good friend and mentor, and I'll help him out in whatever way he needs.
Oh, I really appreciate that, and I need to find about 1,627 more people just like you.
You don't want to clone me. You don't want to clone me. I can't stand myself most of the time. It's like, if there was another version of me, I couldn't even stand that person. So,
I understand. I think the same thing about whenever I tell my dad jokes too. It's just like, they're funny whenever I tell them one time, but whenever people start repeating them, it's like, oh, I understand. I get it. Okay, I understand.
yep, yep, yep.
But
Oh, and just FYI to those listening in, I am based in suburban Austin, Texas, Round Rock, which is in Williamson County.
what are some of your hobbies?
Lots of different things. I love travel. Nathan, as you know, as we spoke right before our formal conversation, had the chance to go to Poland a couple of times for work, and made full use of that. Explored as much as I could. So I love travel. I love food. I mean, I consider myself a foodie. I love. I am a vegetarian. No meat, no seafood, but not vegan. Milk and animal products are okay, just as long as you don't have to actually kill an animal to get me the food. If it's just byproducts, it's like, it's all good. So vegetarian, but not vegan. And I'm a spicy food lover where, I tend to have a tolerance for spice that very few people, out there tend to have. So I love spicy food. I love spicy food. I love travel. I love reading. I'm not a political guy, but sometimes I do like following like a lot of the political stuff that's going on, kind of on and off. And married with 2 kids, so a lot of my time is also spent with with family. But just love the outdoors, love travel, love food, and love to read.
That's awesome. How old are your children now?
Son just turned 7 last month, and daughter will be 12 this fall.
Wow. And I could only imagine this whole COVID-19 lockdown, how difficult that is at those ages.
Yeah, it was challenging, but I have to give them a ton of credit. They actually managed a lot better than I had ever thought, a lot better than probably I could have. And both at their age and even now at 43, I don't think there's any way I could have managed as well as they did. I tend to have cabin fever a lot more than other folks, but I have to say they managed well. But it's a yeah, I'm disappointed that my daughter, who just finished her last year of elementary school, wasn't able to have like the formal send off that all her predecessors have had because of COVID. But I think they're gonna find a way to make up for that. But we'll see.
I know a lot of high schoolers and college people feel that same way for this past year, graduating. And, actually, my children are 4 years apart, um, and one will be graduating from high school and one from college. And it occurred to me of this lockdown, and next year is when they're supposed to graduate. And I was really concerned about being able to make it to both their graduations. What if they're in the same day in like completely different cities? What am I going to do? But it occurred to me if the lockdown continues until next year, then it might be just two Zoom videos going on at the same time, so I get to in both of them. Kind of sad, but at least I won't miss anything. But you were using the past tense there. Did very well. Had trouble managing, things like that. Does that mean that the lockdowns discontinued for y'all?
You're in Houston, I'm in Austin, so one Texan to another. I mean, we know the rules that that Greg Abbott, our governor, has enforced for the state. So we know obviously the state guidelines, we know, things like, masks in certain areas and all that. But I mean, we're not. This isn't March and April anymore. So, here we are, right, dead center in the middle of July. We like my daughter's on dance team, so she tends to go out. She does have like dance class during the week, but they're pretty strict about things. For instance, she has to wear a mask in there. They check the temperature. Mask, wearing the mask while she's doing hours and hours of dance practice. That's definitely challenging to her. And I think really to the folks in the studio, but they've all managed, and I think everybody's just obeying common sense. I mean, we try to go out whenever we can, but we're not. It's I think right now bars, of course, in Texas, as that's the biggest one, but we don't really go to bars. we don't really go to bars right now. Restaurants, I mean, we ate out like a few times. We've eaten out, like whether it's like a dinner or something like ice cream. And in a case like that, we'll usually just eat out. We'll eat like in the patio. The one time we actually ate like a meal, we went to Pluckers. I know there's Pluckers in Houston because I've been to that one. At least I've been to one of the Pluckers in Houston. But we ate at Pluckers. We ate at their covered outdoor patio, where at least you don't have to worry about ventilation and all that. So it's we're going out more and more. It's, I mean, yeah, we have to obey the state guidelines, and obviously any private establishments guidelines. I mean, if a private business says you can't enter without a mask, I mean, I'm not going to argue about that. Whether or not I agree with it, because it's their establishment, they can make that rule. I'm not a fan of masks personally, so I mean, my personal thought is I think they're useless. I think it's a placebo, but I realize that I may have the minority view on it, and minority or majority view, law is the law and rules are rules. So certain things I'm not going to fight.
Yeah, I if you just a couple of things. One is yesterday the person I was interviewing, her 27-year-old son was diagnosed with COVID and has very mild symptoms. And so because he was diagnosed with COVID, they tested everybody that he worked with, and they all tested positive for COVID as well, but they had no symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like really kind of interesting, this disease. Like some people get deathly ill, some get very seriously ill. Like there's a guy I work with at Anaplan. He had COVID, 103-degree temperature for like 3 weeks, in the hospital for a week, fully recovered at this point. And then you see other people like die from it. It's just, it's really amazing. I mean, I don't know of anything else that I've heard that's anywhere similar in terms of the variability in terms of symptoms. Like, if you get the flu, you know it and you feel bad and you stay home. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, so first off, if you don't mind me asking, would it be somebody I know? Since, of course,
No,
I'm a data
they're
plan.
they're in customer care, so I don't. And they came after you, so they went. No.
Okay. No, I was just curious, and even if sometimes people might not want to disclose their names. I mean, it's see one thing I mean, and this is not to get into again like the politics of it. I think that unfortunately, you've got a lot of folks who are trying to exploit this thing politically, and especially since I'm being recorded, I don't want to get into I don't want to skew on some tangent to get into that. I mean, the virus is a virus, and it's definitely something that's serious, but it's not. It's not like this biohazard that is going to wipe out the human population like the way we're a lot of people like to portray it. I mean, we've got like a 99.99, something, like a really high, survival rate, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, you've unfortunately got folks, like this guy at Anaplan who was hospitalized. But the one thing I mean, a death is a death, and it's very unfortunate, and we all, nobody wants that. But to put things in perspective, it's like the overwhelming, you look at the United States, a country of about 330, 340 million people, give or take. Okay, out of that, you look at, where the majority of the deaths have been. And again, and speaking, from someone who has both a sister who's a pediatrician and, who's has young kids who takes them to one, what they've all generally agreed is you don't necessarily need to look at those who are tested positive or who you have to look at or even those who've had it. You have to look at the hospitalizations right now. That's what counts the most, because even the whole reason the quarantines happened. Whether or not you agree with them, whether or not you think that was the right course of action, the main idea behind the quarantine was it's let's make sure that the hospitals don't get overwhelmed, with people. So it's, that's why they were also saying at that time, let's let's hold off on, non-emergency elective surgeries, things like that. And that's where, you start to see like, yeah, I mean, there was some validity, whether or not you agree with it, around, the quarantining and all. But at the same time, right now, what we're seeing is, yes, a lot of people have it, but testing has gone up. I mean, we're testing people at such a rapid rate. The hospitalizations, we're not seeing hospitals being overwhelmed. I mean, like people want to act like, oh my gosh, like hospitals are about to collapse kind of thing. And we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that as a result of COVID, which tells me that, okay, like this thing, yes, it's something serious. Let's all use common sense, wash your hands after, wash your hands after. It blew my mind that the mayor of New York, who had to supposedly tell people, like, a tweet around, how to wash your hands. It's like, come on, people. I mean, my kids when they were 3 knew how to do that. Yours too. It's like you really have to tell, a group of grown-ups, and what, in a city that everybody likes to claim is like the smartest one in the U.S., how to wash their hands. It's like you shouldn't be doing that. And yet it's like hospitalizations, is what I look at. And then you look at like the deaths. It's, you almost think of it, putting it in Anaplan business, business language talk. It's like, think of it like a funnel chart, right? Just like a sales funnel chart, right? It's like, your prospective customers, the ones who are semi-interested, then the ones who you can actually get calls with, all the way down to a closed deal. Look at it from a funnel chart perspective. It's like the whole population versus those who, may be like symptomatic and asymptomatic, to those who actually have it, to those who are testing positive, all the way down to like between the hospitalizations and the deaths, which like the last two, it is minuscule. Again, a death is a death, and I'm not trying to downplay it, because like I said, it's one of my wife's coworkers' mother-in-laws recently passed away from COVID. But you also look at even the ones who've made it down all the way, who've trickled down all the way to the bottom of that funnel chart. These are folks who, generally speaking, tend to have like other health-related conditions. And to be frank, I also question the way that they're counting the deaths and all that, because it's think of this analogy. Suppose someone is diagnosed with cancer, and then they they go home, they're driving back, and they die in a car accident. Yes, that person had cancer, but then they didn't die from cancer. They died from a car accident. But yet I feel like right now, like you're seeing, like, every day, it seems like, like you're always seeing revisions, and and you hear about like revisions and things like that, and it's always like a revision downward. You're not seeing a revision upward. So it's just, that's my take on it. At the end of the day, I think that yes, on one hand we have to take it seriously, which we are. I mean, like I say, you don't shut down what's been like a stellar economy voluntarily for 2 months. One that had like,
or 4 months. 4 months.
4 months. One that had like a record low unemployment. Like 3%, like a level of unemployment that we haven't seen since like the 50s or 60s. That was that low to where it is now, because you don't take it seriously. I mean, people are taking it seriously, but I think that some of the hype and the fear, in my opinion, is overblown. But again, that's just me. So
Yeah,
I have
and
a bit of a long-winded explanation, but that's just
well, one thing that I think really sort of caused the hype and the fear was what we saw in northern Italy towards the beginning. Just bodies that nobody was taking away, and like army trucks carrying like people, and just all these stories. I almost feel like that if it wasn't for northern Italy and kind of like the images that we saw coming out there, that we probably would not have had as severe lockdowns as we had. But once we started down that path, it's really become difficult to look at objectively.
yeah, and there is truth to that, and a lot of that I blame once again on the media, because there is a lot of fear porn peddling that goes on out there, where it's a case of, okay, let's sensationalize things as much as possible. Now, there are people who when this started early on, there were a lot of people who, honest to God, thought that it was a bio attack, and to this day, I think it was. But they seem to think it was a bio attack. Like if you ever saw that 1990s movie, I think it was called like Outbreak or something. It had Dustin Hoffman.
Right.
It had a few big name actors: Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Spacey, and all. And I think everybody thought that it was like that. And the fact is, it wasn't. It's not anywhere even remotely close. It's that it is, again, calling it out for what it is. On one hand, it is a new virus, a strain that we haven't seen before. So obviously, on one hand, that's the bad news. The good news is that this thing has a remarkably high survival rate, and even the fatality rate has been overwhelmingly in either people who are much older, people in the senior citizen population, 65 and up, and or people with severe underlying issues, is what you're seeing. I mean, I visited my parents back in March, just right before, like early March, right before all this all the quarantining and everything started. And that's when like I could start to see, like, some of the sensationalizing happen. I don't think even I predicted at that time that we're going to be like in this lockdown mode for, like, God knows how long. But I said, you know what, they're just gonna peddle this thing. They're gonna make this thing so they're gonna really, like, sensationalize it to the fullest extent they can, and they have. But at the same time, still, there was just so much of an unknown that time that people didn't know what to do. I mean, but we've seen through 4 months that, okay, I mean, yeah, we're doing things like wearing masks, which, again, my personal 2 cents, I still don't believe in, but I follow the rules, just because I have to. Greg Abbott tells us to, so unfortunately that's one battle I'm not going to fight right now. But between the wearing masks, it's like, sure, I mean, we go out, we buy something at the store, we go to the grocery store, we get curbside. It's like, yeah, we got to, wipe down everything. We never did that before. So yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of that extra fear, but I think it's too much of it is just overhyped. And with Milan, and interesting when you bring up northern Italy. See, my wife's brother and his family, they were actually in that place of all places earlier this year. They just went there on a quick trip. They have a 7-year-old son, and they went there on a quick trip and came back. And what happened that time was, it's what a lot of people don't know about Milan is, see, Milan, it's like the fashion capital of Italy. I mean, and a lot of people do know Milan from that perspective. You always hear about, like, these fashion shows and things like that. But one particular aspect of it is it's where a lot of leather goods are made, because like Europeans are into, like, leather pants and like leather jackets, things like that. And they've hired a lot of folks from China over the years, like a lot of gosh, I can't even think of the word, like I wouldn't call them, not transplants, of course. I can't think of the word, but a lot of folks from China who are there, like on, I don't know, like the exact kind of visas, because I'm not familiar with Italian, or EU immigration laws, but they're there from China, in an outsourcing, like an onshoring outsourced way, doing a lot of the work. So of course, a lot of them brought a lot of this with them. I think one of the smart things early on, even though, and again, I'm not trying to get into a political thing here, so please don't think I'm trying to skew the conversation, but the fact that we cut off that travel from China, I think, did help things a lot early on. I mean, whether or not you believe that the virus, is overhyped, or whether or not, like, in spite of the insanely high survival rates, whether or not you think that was right or wrong, I mean, he did the right thing by saying, let's cut off, we know that this thing originated in China, let's cut it off there. And then, not too long after, he started banning the flights from Europe, saying, okay, we're going to ban everything from Europe except for Americans coming back. I think initially it was like the UK and Ireland, I think, were not on the ban list, and then eventually they got on the ban list. So, but it was more that because Milan has such a high population of Chinese folks who came, who are from China working there in their leather goods industry, because they outsource a lot of it. They either outsource a lot of it, or a lot of it was owned by China, where it was kind of like Italian owned, or maybe it was based in Italy, because you've got that knowledge capital when it comes to finance, fashion in Milan, where some of those companies are either majority owned by Chinese, or they have a good stakeholds in them, or a lot of them, they just use like foreign work to do the job. But in any case, you have a large proportion of Chinese individuals there, which is why you start to see it go off because when they're going back and forth to China, whether it's to visit friends and family, their friends and family coming over there, it became the hotspot in Europe. So
Yeah, and I interviewed somebody about 2 months ago who was familiar with that part of northern Italy too. And if I remember right, he said there are flights like 3 times a day from Wuhan to northern Italy. So, there's a lot of connection between those two parts of the world.
yep,
Well,
I believe it.
to move the topic on to the original thought. So, did you know that NASA was planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
I had heard about it, but I wasn't. In fact, believe it or not, Nathan, your tweets are the reason why I've actually kind of kept up to date on that. But I had heard, kind of just rumblings about it, but it seemed like no one had talked about it much. So I didn't know, is it just, something that people just throw out there, but then nothing gets executed on it, or is it something where it's actually going to happen? And even then, is it going to be a case where, I mean, I don't know if it's NASA, it's government funded, but NASA's been pretty inactive. But on the flip side, like you've got, hopefully more like private businesses like Elon Musk's SpaceX. They're trying to say, okay, you know what, NASA in and of itself has been pretty dormant for the last several years, so why don't we fill that void in, and let the private sector do it better.
Yeah, exactly. So just to kind of see what kind of news percolates in out there. What's the last bit of space news that you remember seeing?
Ironically, I think it was maybe one of your tweets that said something like, X number of days to the moon. So I think there was something about that. Present. I mean, again, I'm not trying to get into any kind of political discussions. I know President Trump early on had talked about doing like a mission to Mars. I don't know if that's still going to happen. I mean, it's not going to happen in this term, of course. I mean, I'm again just my only statement of this, and after that, I will not make any more political statements. Love him or hate him, I do think he's on track to winning again this fall. So, like I said, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I think everything right now is pointing to that. But assuming I'm right and he does win this fall, I think that may be something that he focuses on in his second term because many of the things that he had ran on the platform that he ran on for the first term, most of those have already been delivered. I mean, he ran on the wall. It's most of it's under construction. Under construction, permits have been improved or things have already been built. Ran on better trade deals. NAFTA's dead. We got a lot better. Removed a lot of regulations, and he hasn't gotten us involved in any wars of any kind. So he's delivered on his first term platform. So I don't know if, but he had briefly alluded to, like missions to Mars. I don't know if that was just, to put it bluntly, kind of campaigning BS, or if that's something that he's genuinely serious in. So those are kind of last two things that I've heard.
Yeah, one thing that President Trump did was reconstituted the National Space Council, which is chaired by Vice President Pence.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been having multiple meetings per year, including a lot of the cabinet secretaries and different agencies and what have you. So NASA had the plan of landing people on the moon in 2028. And I believe it was February of 2019 at the early part of 2019 as part of the National Space Council meeting. Mike Pence pretty much came out and said, 2028 is too long. We should be able to do it in 2024. If our current contractors aren't up to it, let's get ones who are. We need to make that the objective. And if the plan's not getting us there, we need to change the plan, not the mission. So a lot of really big fighting words. They were able to increase NASA's budget, and they've been laser focused on getting to the moon in 2024 with the goal of landing the first woman on the moon as well as the next man. It's been a very big thing. And in fact, last fall, they had replaced the head of the Human Exploration and Operations Division with this guy by the name of Doug Laverio. And he had a lapel pin with a countdown thing that he would increment each day counting down the days to the end of 2024. And he used to choose like so the human exploration and operations is HEO, HEO. So he used to have a HEO hero of the day where he would like highlight a person at NASA that was really going above and beyond to contribute. And that led directly to this project, which I started in December of 2019. So it's like he's doing a NASA person a day. I'm going to do an everyday person of the day and find out what people think about it and that type of thing. So that kind of. But I know, unfortunately. Oh, and President Trump mentioned the 2024 in his State of the Union address. Of course, he mentioned a gazillion things in the State of the Union address. So the fact that it may not have rose above all the other things that he mentioned isn't there. So I can tell you it's the official policy of the United States government and of NASA to get people on the moon 2024, and that they are making real concrete steps towards making that goal happen. Um, you know, there's a lot of doubt on if it can actually happen because just the nature of these things. You have unexpected setbacks, things take longer than you thought, you have weather things, oh, and of course you have the COVID-19 thing. But anyway, just these unexpected things happen. So, but my plan is to do these interviews all the way through the end of 2024, regardless of what happens. So I hope we stay on track with 2024 because it'll make it a lot simpler to talk to people about it. It's going to be
Yeah.
kind of crazy to say, well, our plans were to do this, and that's this, and now, but I'm still doing it anyway.
I mean, I think right now, see, it's so to be fair, I didn't watch the State of Union address or anything, so I just don't have the patience to watch TV in general these days. But I didn't watch it. I mean, saying 2024, you're right. I mean, if he was serious about that, or even like even 50 to 75% serious about that, I mean, the planning has to start now. And it would have to be even. Of course, I mean, he probably said. My gut feels he probably said that with the assumption that yes, that he's winning this fall. But regardless, the planning would have to happen right now because it would have to be something where and as I've said before, I think the private sector needs to get more involved with that. I mean, sure, we all know about Elon Musk and SpaceX and all that, but I think it also presents the opportunity for a lot of startups. I mean, entrepreneurship, I've always said, is kind of the backbone of America. I mean, it's not everybody in the U.S. is going to work for Coca-Cola or Home Depot or one of those guys. I mean, hell, you and I worked at Anaplan. Anaplan's a startup. Well, I mean, was a startup. Now it's a publicly traded firm, but it's entrepreneurship is going to do it, and you have to I think you have to start giving incentives because that's going to give. Imagine how many more engineers that's gonna we're gonna hire from that. Imagine all these kids that are graduating with engineering degrees, tech degrees, science degrees, even business degrees. I mean, you gotta know how to run the numbers. You gotta know how to market, get funding, all that. Imagine how many jobs that's going to create, and where we're not just dependent on this one gigantic monolithic agency of NASA to say, okay, you guys, NASA or bust. It's no, it's let's work with all these private sector. Let's bring them together. I mean, NASA still would be the nice governing organization that says, okay, you know what, we're kind of be like to put it in consulting terms, the PMO of this whole thing. We're going to project manage this, but we're going to, let's say, contract out, let's say like the space shuttle itself, to use SpaceX. We're going to contract out, this piece to, the fuselages to these guys. It's let's involve the private sector. Let's, try and make that a goal. But I think it needs to be, if they're serious about that too, just given how much planning and all that is involved, I feel like it needs to be more robust than just simply, okay, guys, let's go there and just plant a flag. We did that in 1969. Let's do something more. Let's say, you know what, guys, let's set the stage. Let's not just make it just a first and only trip. Let's set the stage for multiple trips so that literally, as crazy as it sounds, let's set the stage so that we can start setting up colonies on the moon. I don't want it to be 4 years of preparation just to be able to say we planted a flag there. We did that 50 years ago, 51 years ago. Let's be bolder in what we want to accomplish and involve the private sector in that. That's kind of the summary of what I want to say.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. And in fact, NASA, I mean, like to your point, they used to completely design and own and have contractors come in and build to their specification the rockets, they spent lots of money, cost plus contracting, what have you. But NASA's also been experimenting with more competitive and newer ways of doing their contracting. With the retirement of the space shuttle in 2011, the United States did not have a way to launch astronauts into space. And we've actually been paying the Russians something like $90 million per astronaut to launch them to the International Space Station. But also around that time, we started a commercial crew program where NASA said, we don't want to own the rockets anymore. Instead, we just want an American company to come up with this capability. We'll help them along the way. We'll help with their development costs. But ultimately, we just want to buy seats from an American private company. And they selected four companies, Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, um, Boeing, and SpaceX. They went through some initial milestones in development that got down selected to Boeing and SpaceX. They did some additional development. They both did test flights. SpaceX's test flight went perfectly, but then after the test flight and some other tests on the ground, the capsule exploded, which caused some problems. But then they were able to get through all those issues and successfully launch two astronauts to the International Space Station at the beginning of June, which is really great. And SpaceX is paying, I think, something like $55 million per astronaut to launch them into space. But what's more interesting is that anybody can pay $55 million to launch people into space. And SpaceX already has two private customers, Space Adventures, which is going to be doing like a big Gemini type of um, space trip where private people could go and sign up, and Axiom Aerospace, which plans to have it, the first private space station, but also is doing a thing with Tom Cruise to film a movie in space sometime in a few years. So that's really cool. And then Boeing, they had some problems with their test flight. They're working through those, but sometime in the next year they should be able to provide access into space. And so, I mean, that's really good. Now you have competition between two American companies. You have very dissimilar capabilities, and NASA's not the only customer. Um, and it's hopefully the competition between the two and some of the efficiencies that they'll produce help drive down the cost. And even if they keep the cost high, that may make room for competitors to come in and try to create a competing service to kind of get some of that business.
That's great. That's great. It's I have to say, after the whole 737 debacle last year, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Boeing. It's um I don't know. It's funny. It's like it made so many headlines for a while, and then it just seemed like everybody just forgot about it altogether. It seemed like it just got dropped. It was almost like they were trying to sweep it under the rug. So, granted, I mean, like United, because I flew United and Delta a lot last year. Didn't really fly American and Southwest. And American and Southwest are the ones that tend to use among the four major airlines: American, United, Southwest, and Delta. American and Southwest are the ones that use 737s a lot more than United and Delta, at least from my experience. Because when that whole thing happened, anytime I had to travel, I would always check. I would always check like the kind of flight that would be on, because even when I would go to Houston from Austin, granted it's a 3 hour drive, but just because I love my miles and I want my status, I would always fly United. And plus, I'd just be like, you know what? I don't feel like driving. I don't want to deal with the headaches of driving. Let me just, let somebody else do the work, and I can get my miles. So I would still fly from Austin to Houston, though it was like a 25 to 30-minute flight. But like during that time, I would go out of my way to make sure like every single flight that, okay, it's on a 737. And I was like, what? I would much rather travel in one of those regional jets, even though they don't have as much space. One of the United Express regional jets versus United 737. So it was just kind of my thing. But that's great news. I mean, in general, you want, the more the private sector can come up with that, the more competition, the more it's going to force them to actually have to perform better. Because, I mean, 55 million, of course, is not something that just anybody can put up and say, okay, you know what? All right, I got 55 million in the bank. Let me just check, my, my little, coin box, and, let me fish up $55 million. But if more private American companies can do that, I mean, imagine, like I said, we went through, last few years, we went through some massive growth, which got severely curtailed in the last 4 months. But then again, to be fair, that was, a voluntary decision of, we're going to voluntarily, shut down things to curb this virus. But with things now, you're starting to see the last month or so, things are really starting to come back up. I mean, the market's doing great. That pesky unemployment numbers just got to come down. But I think the more you start to see, private companies like this generating jobs, the better it's going to be. And it's like, if we're aiming for like a really robust mission, like, let's go to the moon in 2024, again, not to just plant some flag and say, hey, everybody, we're here, because we did that 51 years ago, but to actually say, you know what, guys, we're going to set the stage to do, I'm not saying this is going to happen in 2024. I mean, to be able to set up colonies there, but to be able to say, this is good, this is it. We're going to use this trip to set the foundation for actually building a colony on the moon. It doesn't have to be, some Park Avenue level thing, but even if it's, we're using this to be able to say, guess what? We're going to set up a colony. We're going to, colonize the moon. Let this be the, tipping domino that does that, and not just, again, just some flag planting mission, because it's like, well, what's the point of that? We've already done that. So
Oh, absolutely. I would like to touch on one more thing about the competition and then talk about the sustainability piece. So around the competition, so we're not just sending people to the moon, we're also sending scientific instruments and rovers and that type of thing to the moon.
mhm.
In the past, NASA would design the lander and the rover and the rocket and all that. They started a program a few years back called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, CLPS. It's like
Yeah.
CLIPS, if you can look at that. And 15 companies had successfully become part of that program with their own lander concepts, and they're responsible for figuring out how to launch and what have you. And for the next 10 years, NASA is going to contract with two of these companies each year to land some instruments on the moon at a particular location, what have you. Next year, next summer, two companies are going to land probes on the moon. One's a Houston-based company called Intuitive Machines, and another one's a Pittsburgh-based company called Astrobotic. Um, and NASA will pay them to land this instrument on the moon. They have to figure out how to launch it, how to design everything. And it's just like a FedEx or UPS type of service. And what that means is that these companies can actually, if they have any additional capacity, they could do whatever they want to with that. And Astrobotic is actually doing kind of like a program with DHL to actually allow for everyday people like you and me to send things to the moon as part of their mission next year. So like for $450, you can send like a quarter-sized object to the moon next year, which is, kind of, they call it the DHL moon box, which is kind of neat. It's meant as a promotional thing for DHL and for Astrobotic, but um, I mean, what it means is, I mean, just like in a mall, setting up that little phone kiosk to sell like phones in the middle of the mall, that would be prohibitively expensive if you had to build a mall and get the people to come and stuff. But because you have like the big stores on the end, like JCPenney's and Dillard's and what have you, and they pay for like the main part of the mall, putting like the little kiosk in there to sell cell phones is cheap. And so NASA is like the big in store that's, really key, and it provides rooms for that. But regarding sustainability, the plan is to have a mission to the moon in 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027. By 2028, have sustained operations, which that doesn't mean continuous 24/7 people on the moon, but for longer and longer periods of time. So I think the plan is definitely, uh, along that direction.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see what they what they want to do with this. I mean, I think I still feel like they just need to be bold about this whole thing. They just need to. It can't be just a case of planting a flag because it's if they seriously say we want to colonize the moon, it's got to be something where they do that. I think the $450 sounds pretty. I think that sounds pretty cool. It's like being able to say, okay, like I want like something of mine, maybe that I'm not attached to, but nonetheless, means something to me to make it to the moon to be able to say that guess what I let like the old school graffiti when people say like so and so was here it's almost like saying like look so and so's things made it to the moon kind of thing almost like a can of spray paint but yeah I'm it's I think it's anyone's guess right now what this could lead to.
And what do you want it to lead to? You talk about more than flags and footprints. If you look at the future of humanity, do you think we're still only on the Earth making like these little occasional trips out into space? Or do you fundamentally see humanity branching out into the rest of the solar system?
I mean, hard to say that because, like I said, I mean, 51 years ago we landed a man on the moon, and yet it's like nothing much. I think space wise has been done since then. So I think at some point, if you want to look at an extremely long timeline, we're talking like you know multiple decades, like almost like centuries even. Yeah, I think that'll happen. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I think in my lifetime, I mean, it'd be nice if be nice in my lifetime if things could get to the point where, like I said, where we actually managed to set the foundations for colonizing the moon.
I
But
always get worried whenever we start talking about things that doesn't happen in our lifetime. It's almost like I guess the part, it's almost like nothing happens by itself. Only people can make things happen. And it's not like planting an acorn and the oak tree keeps getting bigger and bigger by itself. Like everything that we want to happen is going to take somebody to make it happen. And why aren't those people here today to make it happen? I mean, like, what magic happens that make it easier to do in the next generation versus this generation? And is that just because, I mean, is there anything to give us confidence that whatever that is will suddenly appear? You know what I mean?
I don't think it's any one thing. I think it just boils down to it's that people it's that you have to have that desire to get things done. It's that if it's like that famous Back to the Future quote, right? It's like, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. It's that, but it's that even before you put your mind to something, you have to want something enough. I mean, if people feel like, what, this is something I want. I want to be, we want to be able to colonize the moon. We want to be able to actually like land people on Mars safely, then I think it'll happen, but people have to have that desire for that. It's right now, it's a question of, okay, like, are you seeing that desire for that? Or do people feel like, what, that's just, that's something that's way on the back burner? Because if it's something that's way on the back burner, it's like, okay, it's probably not going to happen. But if there's a critical mass of folks who say, what, we want this thing to become a reality, then yeah, I think it'll happen. But people have to want that.
Yeah. And I think people used to want that. Like whenever we were landing people on the moon, people thought we would keep going back and go to Mars and, do all these other things. And whenever that didn't happen, I think a lot of people just lost faith.
Yeah, it could have been the case with that, but you also think since 1969, I mean, after 1969, it's kind of like, you look at society wise, the 70s were so turbulent. You had like what, like the oil embargo, the, high inflation. You had, so many, crises after, one crisis after another in the 70s, where it's kind of like, okay, like 1969, you land a man on the moon. The 1970s, it's like, just, it was just total chaos at that time. And then it's like 80s, it's like things calmed down and things went so much better. So then it's like okay, I mean, and then you had like what the Challenger in '86. That it was kind of like the first real attempt. I mean, there's that one thing in '82, but I don't think that was really as big. It was more in '86. There was that, there was a whole Challenger thing that I think, that kind of killed people's confidence. It's just, there also has to be that, like I said, there has to be the desire, but people also have to have that comfort in knowing that, okay, yes, it's a risk, but it's like when right after takeoff, if you see something like that happen. I mean, I was in fourth grade at the time when when the Challenger was there. I mean, many of our coworkers in Anaplan weren't even born, or even conceived at that time. And when we all saw that, we're like, like part of my friends were like, holy shit, what happened? And that didn't exactly give people a whole lot of confidence in the space program when you see that, okay, like a launch like that and poof. So
Yeah, indeed. Um, I are you familiar with what SpaceX is doing in Boca Chica, Texas?
I'm not actually. I don't follow SpaceX as much, so I'm not sure what. I'm not exactly sure about what it is that they're doing, but Nathan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Hello.
sorry. No, yeah, no, I'm here. No, I'm not familiar with. I don't really follow SpaceX that much. I mean, so I'm not quite sure about what they're doing. So I haven't. I know you follow them a lot more. I actually haven't been following SpaceX as much. So
Yeah, I
sorry.
think it's going to surprise people whenever they see it. Okay, so last question. If it was safe or affordable, would you have an interest in going into space?
Yes, but I would not want to be like the first mover in that front. I would want to be someone who like let's say tomorrow that they came up with affordable space trips. I would be the type of person who would say, you know what, I'm gonna wait another year or two just to kind of see, just to kind of see the system, to see how things go, to see what potential problems or issues they have before I get on that, before I get on that that ride.
That
So
makes sense. Well, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on?
no, I think we're good. I think we're good.
Well, I really appreciate it. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
All right. Well, thanks so much, then, Nathan. It was so great to see. He's so good to hear from you as always. So, yeah, let me know how things come up.
Sure thing. Okay, well, you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. You too. Take care.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.